Hello, and here's another video from IELTS Learning Tips. In this video, I want to talk about reading. I think I get more questions and queries, and people have more challenges, it seems, in reading than anything else. And so there are a few things that I've been observing recently that students are doing. So I've worked quite a lot in reading recently with students, and I've been observing things that they're doing which I really feel are stopping them from getting a high band. And I want to just go through some of those in this video in the hope that you also, if you're doing them, might be persuaded not to do them, because they really do stop you from managing your time and also making sure you get an accurate answer to the question. Just before I get started, I just want to say that if you are interested in getting support or connecting further with me online, then there are two ways in which you can do this. First is to sign up to my website, which is IELTSlearningtips.com, and I have an area there with some free resources, and if you sign up there you can have access to these free resources. And then the second is my Facebook group, which is Band 7 and 8 Success Network, and there are links at the bottom of this video and also in the final slide. I've put the information there. So that's a way in which you can get more help from me in addition to watching these videos. Okay, so let's look at the things that are stopping you from getting a high score in reading. I must say that reading is my favorite thing to teach. I also enjoy teaching writing and working with students on writing, and that's the other area that many students seem to come to me for. But the reading, I think, is something you can turn around quite quickly if you're doing the right things. And if you're not doing the right things, then it seems to become quite a panic for students. And I know lots of students who hate the reading to the extent that they don't even want to practice it. And on working with students and getting them on the right track, I suddenly find that they can't wait for me to send them a new reading. So I hope that if I go through these things, that might happen to you as well. Okay, so if you have the right techniques, you will definitely be able to increase your score in reading. And in the students I work with typically get 8, 8.5, 7.5, and I have had 2 or 3 recently who've got band 9. So it is possible if you have the right approach and strong techniques. But I will say that your language level is also important. You need a good range of vocabulary, and you need a good understanding of how text works. And that's something that you probably know about anyway to an extent, because when you do your writing, you have to understand that too. You have to understand how you introduce a topic, how you make one paragraph around a main topic with lots of evidence and support. And that's really how reading works too, because the two things are obviously the same. Your writing and the reading passages, okay, at a different level, but they are the same. Right, so let's dive in and look at some of these things that you might be doing, which I personally believe you shouldn't be. Okay, so don't do these. It's impossible to understand the whole text. When I started teaching IELTS, I was quite horrified that we were told not to read the whole text, because to my mind, having taught lots of comprehension, without the whole text, how can you answer the questions? But IELTS is not really about comprehension. It's more a study skills exercise. It's about finding small pieces of information in a large body of text. And that's very different to comprehension. So spending a lot of time on the text when you first start the reading is a waste of time. And that's where some of your time is going if you can't finish in time. You don't need to look at the text hardly at all until you start working with the questions. So look at the title and subtitle, and in the IELTS readings that I've seen recently, especially in the Cambridge 13, 14, that seems to be enough to give you an overview of the topic. So don't read any more than that. If you're still struggling, look at the first paragraph and skim it through, but don't do any more than that. That's the absolute maximum. This is another thing people do. They want to skim through the text to find out what it's about. The title, subtitles should tell you all you need to know. And skimming, what are you looking for when you skim? You need a purpose. You should always ask yourself, why am I doing this? And if there isn't an answer to that why, then probably you shouldn't be doing it. Okay, this is another thing. All of these things, look, are happening before you even look at the questions. How do you know what the keywords in the text are going to be? The keywords you need are not in the text, they are in the question. So don't underline anything in the text. Some people underline names of people. You could do that, but I mean, really, until you get to the questions, you won't know what you're going to need from the text. So my personal advice is anything that you do that is wasting time before you know what the questions are shouldn't happen, shouldn't be done. Again, underlining words you don't know. It's quite possible you won't need that word. And I've seen texts where, you know, certain paragraphs were hardly used at all. So if you're spending time on these things and then you're not going to need them, you're just wasting time. Okay, and this is a rule that everybody seems to do, and I would advise against it for one reason, but there are other reasons, but for one reason. Sometimes in the middle of a paragraph, you have the word however or but. And when you have that word, which I'm sure you know from your writing, introduces a contrast, introduces the other side of the argument. As soon as you see that word, whatever has gone before it will be turned around, will be turned on its head. And if you miss that word, but, or however, or a similar word, then you're going to get the wrong end of the stick. You're missing the point. So I think it's quite a dangerous strategy sometimes because it can lead you down the wrong track. If you need to look at a paragraph, say for headings, skim the whole thing, skim it through. And I've said this many times, if you look at my other videos on headings and on reading techniques, skim it through and then ask yourself one question: what is it telling me? And what it tells you is probably going to be the main point in the paragraph, and that will match with the heading. So try and get more of an overview sense than just focusing on one sentence here and one sentence there. It can be quite a dangerous thing to do. Okay. And then ultimately it will waste your time, because if you don't find it, then you've got to go back again and look again and probably end up reading the whole paragraph. So basically what I'm saying is do as little as possible with the text before you've seen the questions. Okay, there are a few more, let's move on. So you need to stop these as well. Okay, I've just said that. So don't spend, in fact, all I would do is look at the title, look at the subtitle, and increasingly there is a subtitle. And if there's any doubt about the topic, and generally they're fairly self-evident, fairly self-explanatory, but if there is any doubt, then just skim very quickly through the first paragraph, and that should be enough to take you then onto the questions. And it will only take you a matter of seconds to do that. Okay, this is another rule that I think a lot of people pick up. I'm not sure from where. Why should it be chronological? I mean, why should a yes, no, not given question always be in the next paragraph? It doesn't make any sense to me. It could be all over. I think generally passage 1 might be a little bit more chronological because that is aimed at everybody, whatever band. But once you get to passage 3, then you need some more sophisticated techniques. And this is not sophisticated. This is just an arbitrary rule that I have found in many cases to be wrong. So work more with the keywords in the question. And if you can't find it in the place that you're looking from the previous question, then scan and improve your scanning techniques so that you can pick out words very easily. And if you pick the right keywords, you should be able to find them by scanning through the text. So it's not always going to be chronological, and sometimes by adhering to this very strict rule, and I find a lot of people are very, very clear about it, it's got to be after the previous question. And I've come across situations where students have completely missed some very easy answers because they refuse to go back to previous paragraphs. So be open to anything and everything. Look at the text and don't follow rules. Okay, this is another one I observed, and I found it very curious, that students would have a really good keyword and they would find the location, and then they would only read the part of the sentence after the keyword. But that doesn't make any sense, because if you found a keyword, you need to read the whole sentence to understand everything. And quite often, if I'm sure you've seen this in IELTS, the question will be the other way round from the sentence in the text. And this happens very frequently. So if you're just going to read the second half of a sentence, then the answer might be in the first half and you'll have missed it. So my rule is, whenever you find a keyword, always, always, always read the whole sentence. And sometimes, particularly in passage 3, you may also need to read the sentence before it and the sentence after it. But that very detailed reading of that place will help you to discover the answer, instead of randomly jumping from paragraph to paragraph. So once you've got the keyword and you're sure that's the place, then read it carefully. Don't start leaping about, because that's another problem. Students tend to look, and if it doesn't hit them in 2 seconds, they run off somewhere else. And that is such a waste of time. Look carefully at the place you found, read it carefully, and you'll find that the answer, if you're in the right place, will pop out. And that will stop you wasting a lot of time. And this is another thing, and this is linked to what I said just now. Often students will find the answer. The answer seems clear, but they have no confidence that they are right, and then start looking elsewhere. And what happens then is very dangerous, because you then start persuading yourself that this new place is a better solution. And instead of going back to the question and saying, right, does this really fit the question? You start forgetting about the question, forgetting about the keywords. If you're convinced that the answer is correct, if you're happy with the answer, if it seems to fit, put it down, move on. If you have a doubt, put a question mark and come back later. And you will have time. There is plenty of time to do this. I think I've mentioned before, a lot of my students do it in 50 minutes. 55 minutes. So you have at least 5 minutes at the end to go back and check anywhere you have a doubt. But by jumping around and trying to convince yourself, you are wasting time. And it's better to acknowledge there's a little doubt, move on, and when you finish, go back. And you will find, if you do that, then you will have time at the end. And I can't say that enough. I can't stress it enough. Okay, and again, not sticking to the 1 minute per question. Okay, it's not a rule that's laid down by anybody, but it's just common sense. You have 40 questions, so that's about 40 minutes. Some of them are going to take a little bit longer. Headings need a little bit more reading. Finding the information in a paragraph needs a little bit more reading. Sometimes the summaries need a little bit more reading if they're not all in one place. So some questions will take a little bit longer. You also know that passage 3 is a little bit more tricky than passage 1. And so that might take you a little bit longer. So if you just on average spend about a minute, then you should be able to finish everything in around 50 minutes. And then once you've done that, then you've got 5 minutes to go back and very calmly go through the questions where you had a slight doubt. And believe me, it does work, and it will happen if you stop doing these things and start doing the right things. And I have plenty of students who've scored 7.58, 8.59, who can testify that when we started working together, they were doing these things. And once they stopped and started looking more carefully at sentences and words and keywords, then they could do it far more easily, far more quickly, and the result was that they got a high band. And it's possible for you to do this if you stop limiting yourself, if you give yourself some flexibility to look anywhere and everywhere and to be more systematic, then you too will get a high score in reading. Okay, so I hope that's helpful, and I'm sorry I'm a little bit strong on these, but I really believe that these things are the things that are stopping you from getting a high score. Okay, so if you do these things, this will definitely happen. You will have more time. This will definitely happen. It won't happen overnight. You may need to work on it a little bit, but then suddenly it will click and the answer will start popping out every time you find the right place. It helps you to focus more on the questions, and then if you have the question clearly and paraphrased in your mind, it helps you to focus better in the text as well. And when you're more focused, then you're more likely to find the answer. If you're panicking and random, the chances of finding the answer are, it's a needle in a haystack. It's almost tantamount to zero. And if you do all these things and these timing technique and focus improves, you'll definitely get a higher score. And as I mentioned before, this is my Facebook group. I try to post, you know, a little tip every day. Sometimes it might be every other day or every 2-3 days, but I try to post little tips regularly in there. And don't forget, there are free resources on my website, IELTSlearningtips.com, and you can find some planning help for writing, some examples of writing there, and I have a few other things that I'm going to put in very soon as well. So I hope that was helpful. I'm pretty sure if you stop doing those things and start doing better things and improve your technique, then you should be able to improve your score quite substantially. So thank you for watching, and I see you on the next video. And don't forget to share these videos if you find them useful with other people you know who are trying to get band 7 and 8 in their IELTS. Thank you. Bye-bye.